All right, welcome back to Ottawa Studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, we are talking about emergency management and journalism. What do the news folks have to do with disasters? Sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at her. There it is, a good piano riff to start your day. Thanks again for joining us here at Inside My Canoe Head. Whether you're listening to me as you're bombing down the highway, getting about your chores, or doing whatever it is you might be doing, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us wherever and however that may be happening for you. And your feedback that keeps coming in at www.insidemycanoehead.ca. Drop over to our website. All that stuff aside, welcome. Welcome to this week's episode, and I think it's a really important topic to talk about the role of journalism in an emergency management, because there's a lot of discussion about how people consume their news, where they go to get relevant, trusted information, and the disruption model that's occurring in the current Canadian, and I'm pretty sure elsewhere, journalism world. I think there's a relational importance and a something we got to put together here today. So today we're going to talk about journalism. First, what is journalism? Well, we can go back in history. People have been telling stories for the longest period of time. I mean, if we look at Purdue's definition, it's journalism is the practice of gathering, recording, verifying, and reporting on information of public importance. If we look at our friends over at Wikipedia, journalism is the production and distribution of reports on the interaction of events, facts, ideas, and people that are news of the day and that inform society to the least some degree of accuracy. I love that last part. We also have, when we look at the Canadian Association of Journalists, they call it as all journalistic work contains work of original production. I find that interesting, that little piece they put in there about having some type of individual thing. But it's also an activity that includes the pursuit of truth for its audiences, an act of creation and dissemination, and a particular set of methods. The purpose of journalism, according to the Canadian Association, is an act of journalism sets out to combine evidence-based research and verification with the creative art of storytelling. Its central purpose is to inform and empower people to make sense of events and issues and to serve in their interest. When we go to methods, journalism work provides clear evidence of self-conscious discipline calculated to provide an accurate and fair description of facts, opinion, and debate on play within a situation. The problem that we have in modern-day journalism is that a good portion, a sizable portion, and more than a majority of the population does not view modern-day journalism, what we know it to be now, as something that is trustworthy in general, as a body of work. I mean, it's nowhere near the 9 or 7% trust level that the confidence level that the U.S. House of Congress has, or in the 30s that the Canadian House of Commons has. I mean, politicians are bad, but journalists aren't all that much better on the scale of what the public perception of trust is. And really, if we go back to that definition that talks about serving the public, if the public doesn't trust you as a plurality or a majority, then are you truly serving the public by doing the work you're doing? So, in other words, who can call themselves a journalist? Well, journalism is not a profession in the traditional sense, which means it's not protected and codified in law. For example, you can't call yourself a physician in the province of Ontario unless you are a member of the Ontario College of Physicians and you've met all their requirements, which is medical school, you're practicing in good practice. And if you call yourself a physician in the province of Ontario, you can be fined $10,000 for using that title when you're not a physician. That's a profession. Same thing exists for lawyers, engineers, electricians, plumbers. They're all protected tradespeople, and to use that name, you're required to be a member of the organization and pay your dues and be a member in good standing and follow the rules and the ethics. Well, there is a code of conduct for journalism that most journalists prescribe to, but there's no gatekeeper to the profession, shall we call it that, of journalism. So I can call myself a journalist, right? I can gather information. I'm a researcher, right, by trade. One of the things that I do is I go out and I ask a whole bunch of questions to a bunch of people, and I gather data from them, especially about emergency management, preparedness, beliefs in the world, etc. And I gather all this information. I go squirrel away. I do a bunch of data analysis on it, and I come up with some conclusions. I could call myself a journalist, and nobody out there in this audience could argue with me because there is no gatekeeper. So fair enough. But I think traditionally we understand what journalism used to be. Maybe not as far back as the Ward Cleaver days, leave it to Beaver for those of you who are old enough. But when you think about journalism's role in society, if it is to inform, then that hasn't evolved since pre-internet, because now the internet informs long before journalists get an idea of what's going on, or they're still assessing facts at the same time we are, which means there's no gatekeep. It used to be events would happen. The journalists would put together a story as to what was going on, and they would inform Canadians or whatever population it may be about the events, the variables involved, the personalities involved, and what potentially we could see coming next. That occurs now in something that used to be held in high value, and I think is what one of the key pieces we've lost in journalism is good old school investigative journalism. There was a time in society where journalists looked and they held the people in power to account. They investigated anomalies and things of interest, and they did so in such a way under legal protection and under legal premises that they would be able to give us the truth. We could find out what was going on in the background in Enron. We could find out what was going on in the back doors of the Defense Department. We could find out what was happening at our local political organization because of investigative journalists, right? The problem that we have now is they're seen to a large degree to have a significant bias. Now, bias simply means you have a lens through which you look at a set of data, right? Because a fact is a fact. We've said this before on this podcast. A fact is something we know to be true, right? A set of events occur. Those events, what happened in those events are fact. What people think why it happened and the contributing factors, that's people adding their own perspective to it. That's a bias, right? That's your bias, your lens you look through. If you're a feminist, if you're a gender ideologist, if you're a carnivore diet eater, or you're a vegan, or you're a CrossFitter, or whatever it is, you all have a lens you look through that creates a bias when you look at any set of events. The idea of publicly funded journalism in its beginning here in Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and it's written right in their charter that they have an independent journalism board, right? The editorial board of Canadian Broadcasting Corporation under the Broadcasting Act, or under the CBC Canada legislation, is independent. That's written in the law, but there are very few Canadians who actually believe that to be true, right? It's enacted and they can defend and say that, but when you look at the balance of probabilities, when you look at the balance of stories that are done, there's been some research that's come out, and I haven't looked into the details of it, so I can't attest that this is absolutely meets the scientific standard, but when you look at the friendliness nature of what's coming out of certain broadcasters, they're friendly with the government and they're not. And if you want the dichotomous look, just look at the American political network. Take MSNBC and Fox News. They're both independent journalists. One is a rah-rah Biden and one is a rah-rah Trump, or say rah-rah Republican, rah-rah Democrat, whatever way you want to frame it, right? They're biased. They're not independent logical media that is giving people the facts. They're giving it through a lens of which their audience wants to hear. And that's what their audience wants to hear. So that's what they deliver, right? And when the audience listens, the audience loves you, they pay the bills, and everything works out. Private journalism is ones that try to operate on their own. And we're seeing a resurgence of that right now in Canada, and we're seeing it in many parts around the world. The importance of it is that you've got a lot of really great thinkers in the world. And right now in the transition period, a lot of them cut their teeth, as the saying goes, in traditional media sources or organizations in Canada, have gained a sufficient number of followers, and now they've gone independent, right? And so those are now no longer funded. The question we have in Canada, and I don't know the circumstances in the United States or where you are in the world, is that the journalism are funded largely, almost completely by the federal Canadian government, right? So there's a big slush fund that gives money to journalism to save the traditional journalism dying because people aren't buying newspapers and they're not subscribing to cable, right? Forget the fact that you may look at it through the lens and realize that if they delivered a quality product that people were interested in, that told the truth and was framed appropriately, then people would subscribe, people would listen, and people would pay, right? But we have a problem with disruption models in a lot of Western societies. If you look at Uber came in and totally disrupted the taxi industry. Every jurisdiction reacted differently. Some of them said it's a free-for-all, have at her, and most of the traditional taxis died off. Some of them came in with very protectionist rules. So if Uber or if Lyft is going to operate in my area, they have to follow the taxi code of practice, right? Disruptive technologies and disruptive ways of doing things are supposed to do just that. So one argument out there is that we need to let journalism go the way of disruption. So in other words, stop publicly funding journalism. If CTV or Globe or the CBC cannot raise sufficient money from advertising or subscribers, they close, right? Canadians will pay for news. I pay for news. I subscribe to several news sources in Canada, Terry Glavin and The Line. And I provide them both significant amounts of money, and I'm about to sign up for Sam Cooper's subscription service as well. I'm willing to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year to get quality journalism in Canada. I just can't find that on CBC, CTV, and Global. If I was in the United States, I would not be able to find a single news channel that I could trust to give me accurate and truthful reporting as to what was going on. So I go and I pay for independent journalism sources so that I get that. Today was a prime example. There was a beautiful penned expose by Andrew Potter in The Line, and it's available over on Substack, talking about the true situation in Canada, that the country is broken. But he very lays out from a historical perspective a roadmap and a pathway that deviates from everything you would ever hear in the public sphere from the publicly funded media. And it's brilliant. It's brilliantly written. It cuts to the heart. It cuts to the truth. And that's the kind of honest journalism that we miss. All of that to say, it's a very disruptive model. So what most people do now, and based upon the research that we do have, is people understand that if journalism is publicly funded, then it is going to choose a reporting line that is very close or reasonably close to the viewpoints of the person that's funding it, okay? Let's be honest. I don't care where you work, you don't bite the hand that feeds. I work for a university, I don't bite the hand that feeds. I work for a company, I don't bite the hand that feeds, right? I'm not going to come out and call out my parent company for whatever I may think it needs to be called out for, because I don't bite the hand that feeds. The same thing exists in journalism. You're not going to have journalism that is receiving government money turn around and be considered an advocate for or a voice of independent journalism on what's going on related to the government. You have to look at it through the view of the funder. So if you look at independent journalism, you may not agree with it, right? You may perfectly fine to not agree with what's being put out, but the individual is funded by readers, right? We pay the Line's bills. The Line does what they want. I have no say whatsoever in the product that they produce, right? I don't influence it. I don't get a vote. There isn't an insider track where these private journalists send out, hey, listen, would you like to see a story on the following? No, because that's not journalism. They're out there investigating things that they think are important, and they're doing a fantastic job. I get a great piece of information, so I give them money for it. I don't want in, because I believe in journalism. I don't want to be able or have the power to influence what somebody reports on. That would break the whole model on its own. So no, not at all. Not interested in the least of having a say on what these organizations do and put forward. So what has that got to do with emergency management? Well, very clearly, when individuals look at times of an emergency. So if we look at what the data clearly says about how populations react to exogenous shock, especially in the days of social media, right? So we have to consider the environment that people are operating in. And when we look at it, where do people go for information? We know number one is to their bonding social capital. That is their tight, immediate circle. So those are your friends and your family and the people that you count on. That old cliche about who do I call at 3 o'clock in the morning. But also right next to that, they have a trusted network of sources. So what we've built as humans, and each and every one of us have a different set, but we've all built a set of trusted resources that for one reason or another, we go to in times of an emergency. Now, the research tells us that trust is based upon the previous delivery of accurate and helpful information and a regular, or if irregular, a profound relationship exists. So those are the two things that research tells us need to be present for this trusted circle to exist. So you have one, right? If I was to say right now, I heard an earthquake just happen in New York City, you would go to your trusted sources. Some of you would go, it's about a plurality. Some of you would go to your family and friends, and some of you would go to the small little sphere of trusted sources that you found online to go see what's going on. Now, for me, I'll give you my rundown as how this world works for me to understand the frame that I'm talking about, and then we'll get into the emergency management piece. Twitter or X. I go there because that is unfiltered, right? There isn't a filter on it, and thank Lord there is no filter on what's put on Twitter. Now, I'll argue with anybody that right now X is the best social media platform for human interaction because it is the only one where you can mute the idiots. And I'm honest, people always talk about how Twitter has hate speech. Yeah, it does. But you can actually mute it. You have two. You have a for you and a following, right? So if you're going to venture over into the for you, that's the free-for-all. That's the cage fight, right? That's Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club, but there it is. The for you on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, that is your Fight Club. Get in there and start swinging. That's where all the hate and whatever everybody's screaming and yelling is. But when you come over to the following, you build your following of people that you want to listen to. So I have equal amount of voices on the progressive side, equal amount of voices on the conservative side, equal amount of voices on the libertarian side, and equal amount of voices on the authoritarian side. Because when issues pop up, I know I see it there, right? Because I created a following of about 400 and some, I think it's 500, about 500 people that I follow on Twitter. The rest of the idiots I could care less, and I don't see it. I don't see any hate on Twitter, right? Because I block it all. And I don't block it by blocking people. I just don't go over to the for you. So all I see in the following is what I want. Okay. So I go there, I see it, and then I go to official sources, right? So I know the government of Canada speaks here. I know the province of Ontario speaks here. I know the city of Ottawa speaks here. I know Ottawa Public Health, for example, which, by the way, has the world's greatest, without question, social media team. I go there, right? I don't listen to anybody else as about public health issues that are coming in the city of Ottawa. I go to their X feed, right? It's right there, black and white, and there's a link to their website to go deep dive should I choose to do so. So I do that, and then by time the day's events has occurred, I've got a column in my paid subscriber list where one of these independent journalists, the brilliant people they are, have gone out, done the same research that I have, and written an opinion piece. That's journalism in the 21st century. That's what the model looks like. So when you're looking for emergency management, so when exogenous shocks occur, people go to these trusted sources, right? So I've had this debate many times, and I had some more debates about it this morning on LinkedIn. When you are in emergency management and you want your population to listen to you, don't assume they'll listen to you because you have a cool title or a polo shirt with a crest on it, right? That does not get you attention. That does not get people trusting you, believing you, listening to, or following your guidance. You have to build that institutional trust in times of peace and calm, as FEMA would call it, blue sky planning. You need to do this now when there are no events going on, to build that trusted two-way relationship between you and the population you serve, so that when an event occurs, when that event starts up, bam, there you go. They come to you. I now trust you, but I do not. I know the city of Ottawa speaks. Now, the city of Ottawa has decided in their infinite wisdom, and it's a city of 1 million people, so it's not a small place. So they've decided in their infinite wisdom that they don't want their own social media feed for emergency management, right? So I've got the fire feed, I've got the police feed, I've got the paramedic feed, I've got the bylaw feed, I've got the public health, and I've got the city account. They're not all working together, and it's happened in the past when we've looked at the data that came out of our 2018 tornadoes, that the information was not coordinated. It was not correlated very well. Now, it wasn't necessarily telling people to turn left when they should have turned right, but you could tell that the people operating the social media feeds on all of the city's agencies were not in constant communication, which meant the message was not regular. So people were getting slightly different or time different pieces of information depending on who they were listening to. We advocate, and the municipalities that I work with, we advocate for them to create a specific feed. Now you build resources, and a good friend of mine told me how they did it in a jurisdiction where he worked, where he simply gave away, he ran contests every week. So he put out on his social media feed a contest, a couple of questions about emergency management. Everybody that got it right went into a lottery, and you won a $20 Starbucks card, Tim Hortons card, Dunkin' Donuts card, $20 a week. That's nothing, right? That's that's slightly over $1,000 a year. But for $20, people will listen to your Twitter feed. It's really that simple. So he took it from a couple hundred people to thousands and thousands of followers. He had built a relationship. People asked questions. He would answer them. Now, they knew the investment, so they hired an intern to come in and run their social media. Somebody who was savvy, knew all the ins and outs of it, and this person there interacted with the population. And so you built a two-way relationship. You realize that on the other side of your publicly, as I call it, public sector resident-facing preparedness communications, as a long acronym, at the front of that, there's actually a human being who's on the other end of that, and they'll answer my questions. So I've got a question about preparedness. Who do I ask in the government? Well, I'm going to hop over to X. I'm going to jump onto this website. I'm going to jump onto this handle. I'm going to fire a question. I'm going to get an answer. That builds a set of trust. What that does is it establishes a relationship. So now, when the balloon goes up, when the shizzy hits the fizzy, you've built a relationship with thousands of people that are going to come to you. Your side of the relationship is you don't have much time to become a voice. You have to get on that handle and start telling people what you know and what you don't know. You be honest, you be straightforward. And when you build that trusted network, that social capital between you and the citizens you serve, you create a trusted pathway. You get inside that small loop I earlier talked about that people have in the trusted online sources. You're one of them. So when there's an event that happens, or they hear rumors of an event that happens in the city, they will squirrel their way over. They might ask their sister, brother, or parents what's going on, but they're also going to jump over to X, and they're going to pull down your emergency management feed, and they're going to go. Now, I'm going to give you this really cool hint. Everybody should download X. Now, that's not because I don't care whether you like the spaceman or the Tesla guy or not. Irrelevant. Couldn't care less. Download X. You don't have to pay for it. It's free of charge. Create a list. Now, if you look at the list functions on the left-hand side, you can create a list. And what a list is a separate grouping for a very specific purpose. And I'll give you a perfect one. Right now, I have one called Ottawa Emergency Feeds, and it's public. Anyone can follow it, right? So on there, I have the Ottawa Fire Services, Ottawa Traffic, Ottawa Paramedic Service, We have the Ottawa Police is on there. We have public health, and we have bylaw. So when an emergency or a situation happens in Ottawa, unlike every single other freaking social media outlet out there, Facebook and all the rest of them, I can go to X and I can go right to my feed, and I will only see the official feeds I want. I will not be bamboozled by everybody's opinion and what people are seeing and what they think is happening and everything else. All of that, I don't see any of it. There is no other social media feed or no other social media company or platform that exists where you can curate a list of just 4 or 5 very important voices that you want to hear. And you can create a list for left politics, right politics, city parks, curling, golf, whatever it is. You can create a list where you parcel off the voices. Now, they're all going to be over in the following tab anyhow, but then you take those ones out of following and you're going to make a little separate list. Just look it up, Google it. It's brilliant. Everybody should have it. If you don't do anything else on Twitter, create the list that says, say you're in Boomtown, New York. So Boomtown emergency feeds. So you take the local, all the people that you think you might want to listen to in times of an emergency, and you put them on Twitter, and you don't do anything else. You don't follow anybody. You don't post. You don't do any of that crap, right? You don't worry about filling out all your details of your profile. You come up with a name, Big Bad Boy on Street D, or whatever you want to call yourself, because nobody cares, because it's not about what your name is. It's about you creating this small little space where you get accurate information from the source, from the government source, right? Now, that gives you something that journalism can't, right? Because journalism will not be as fast as the government, will not be as fast as social media. So now the value of journalism in an emergency is far less informing people of what's going on, but it's asking questions and posing inquiries to those who are involved in the situation, because what's going on is already going to be out in the public domain, right? Now, there is always a role to ask questions about, did this really happen? Did you really make this decision? Why was this decision made? Things along that line, sure. But the time of where people, when an event would happen and people would turn on their TV and look for their local news channel to find what's going on, that demographic are in their 60s, and they're getting older. So the key that we stay here at Inside My Canoe Head, we talk about in our books and everything that's available on preparednesslabs.ca, is it's about personal responsibility. So you can't depend, and nor should you depend, on journalism for accurate information as a writ large. It is your responsibility to find out and curate feeds that provide you the level of granularity and information that you want from both the official feed and from trusted sources, right? That's your responsibility as a member of a population. If you want to get accurate information, if you want to get information that can be trusted, you have to find those trusted sources. And you need to do it now. You can't wait for an emergency to flip it on. Now, it's really not difficult. It doesn't cost any money. You just have to put time and effort, but you already do it now. And as we said before, you think about it, you have those small circles that you turn to in times of an emergency. So who are they? Right? Find them, put them in one space so you know where to go to find out what's going on when shizzy hits the fizzy. But the last part that we'll pound on today is really simple. That is information, but that information does not necessarily tell you what to do. You should have a rock solid, foundational family and household preparedness plan and a trifecta of scenario plans that allows your family to react to general situations and to be able to act without information, right? An event occurs. When you have a well-built family plan, you're not texting people. You're not running around like chicken with a head cut off. You're not trying to find out what's going on. You're not trying to figure out X, Y, and Z. You're executing a well-understood and well-rehearsed plan at the family level, and people are doing what they're supposed to get everybody home safe, right? You're not worried about it. My family plan is clear. I don't have to talk to anybody. Significant event happens in the city. I don't have to text people. What are you doing? Well, are you okay? No, I don't have to worry about any of that. If they need something, they reach out, right? But I'm not going to clog the airwaves with a whole bunch of different things. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do, right? Whenever a significant disruption, and we're all adults now, so we know exactly what that looks like. We know exactly what to do, and we execute it. It's not that hard. It's free of charge. Drop over to our website, www.preparednesslabs.ca. We've got a free download for 3-page family preparedness plan starter kit, if you want to call it that. That's available for you to download free of charge. You don't even have to give us your email. You can just stealthily slide in the side door and out the back door. We won't even know you were there. That's the brilliance of free stuff. We're not trying to hook you for something else. Listen, thank you very much for joining us this week at Inside My Canoe. I hope this little conversation, and it's more of a conversation that we had here today, and I think hopefully it was helpful in realizing the struggles and challenges that journalism have today. And the need for you to take a leadership role in determining where your information comes from, who are your trusted sources, what your family preparedness plan is, your trifecta of support plans, and be ready to deal with the world when it goes pear-shaped. Journalism has a huge value in society. It always has, and it continue will. How it's delivered now, I think, needs to go through a significant disruption where probably most of the journalism outlets we know now need to disappear or morph into something else. And for that to happen in a properly and logical manner, the government has to get out of the way. There's no other way to do it. The government has to let them collapse and let something rise from the ashes. So thank you. Have yourself a great week. Drop us a line if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll see you around the corner. Take care.